Ask Reddit thread. Serious tag. Teachers of Reddit. Did a student ever offer sex to pass a class? If yes, how did you react? And what were the further consequences? Asking this again as I forgot the serious tag last time. Yes, I was a teacher in rural West Africa for a few years. I had a student approach me and make an offer. I rejected them 100% and had long conversations regarding how inappropriate and terrible this was. It didn't help that it was quite common for this to happen, and the same females that were approaching me were approaching the other teachers. At one of my schools, 2 girls became pregnant from teachers, which gets kinda ugly since pregnant girls are not allowed to be in school. We had faculty oh my god, I can't say that word. Faculty meetings, where the principal would say verbatim, "Okay, I need to tell all the teachers not to sleep with students," and the teachers would laugh and say, "But who are we supposed to sleep with?" And everyone would chuckle and then discuss the next topic on the agenda. Oh, what? You sound like an RPCV. I remember having to deal with this on a disturbingly frequent basis as a secondary school teacher in West Africa. You basically described every beginning of term staff we've ever had. They just laugh it off like it's not completely fucked up to sleep with students in exchange for grades. There was even the Benin Vol who was murdered for blowing the whistle on that behavior. Shit's so serious that all you can do is turn a blind eye. What? Oh, holy shit, I remember hearing about the volunteer in Benin. I didn't know she was killed because of that, though. Sadly, this was the reason. A few Benin volunteers moved to Senegal after the murder and outlined the story. The murdered volunteer reported the abuse of Benin Peace Corps staff members who either knew or was related to the offending teacher. The staff member immediately told the teacher about the report, and the volunteer was murdered that night. I'm not blaming the Peace Corps, just this one local employee. I'm not sure about the fallout from this incident elsewhere, but I know Senegal PCVs thought twice about going to local staff members with similar issues after we heard the story. Wow. I saw this as well during my time in West Africa. We did an AIDS awareness training and brought a student leaders for one-day boot camp to help extend the message. During the breaks, most of the teachers and even the faculty discussed which students they were going to sleep with. These were 30 to 40-year-old men with 2+ wives talking about abusing 13 to 16-year-old girls. When they tried to rope me, a 25-year-old single guy, into their talks, I would tell them to piss off, cultural respect be damned. One of my happiest memories is when my community drove out a teacher who was a serial abuser. They chased him out of the village at 3 a.m. If they caught him, I imagine an extended hospital stay would have been his best case scenario. I have so many heartbreaking stories from students, mostly girls, and plenty from disillusioned, upstanding teachers and faculty. Sadly, they outnumber the stories that ended well, but one should always look for nuggets of happiness. I didn't even know this was a thing. A student offered sex and romance not to pass a class, but because of some deep, long-term infatuation. It took all the effort I had to wind her down gradually without causing her to be embarrassed, or getting a dysfunctional administration involved in something greater than they could handle. I found farting in front of people goes a long way to detooting their crush on you. Not true in every scenario. I accidentally farted in front of my girlfriend and she thought it was cute. Gross. Sad to say, one of the reasons I quit teaching after only 2 years was constantly having to be on guard that I was never alone with a student for even a moment. A colleague had a student who had a crush, and he had to explain how it wasn't going to happen. She accused him of sexual misconduct, and he was fired and charged. Yes, a few weeks later, the girl told the truth, but once the label's on you, it sticks and you're done. I was young, 22, and I knew I had to remove myself from even the possibility of that happening. Let's go on to the next one. Female university professor for 16 years. I have been flirted with countless times, but only outright propositioned twice. Neither time was for grades, as both students were already doing well in class. One was a 19-year-old boy who told me that he was sure he could handle a 30-year-old woman. I managed not to laugh at him, mainly because I was very fond of him. Of course, I turned them both down. No consequences to them. I suppose that when they do it because they actually feel attracted to you as opposed to having ulterior motives, it's much easier to handle because there's no actual malice in it. Yes, I was flattered rather than offended and just explained that my husband doesn't really like it when I have sex with anyone except him. Okay. TLDR-ish. During my few-year stint at Educational IT, a brilliant, at-risk female high school senior falsely accused me of sexual misconduct, but I quickly produced video evidence to the contrary and she was removed from my program. Didn't press false report charges and had her placed at-risk student assistance program. 6 years later, after earning her MS and making a good life for herself, she tracked me down, poured out her heart, produced a heartful, tearful, remorseful apology through a ridiculous amount of tears and asked me to dinner. We'd been inseparable since, together for 5 years, married for 3. I should add that I haven't been a teacher since the term after she made her claim. Too much red tape in politics, not enough pay. The longer version, shortly after college, my old high school district offered me an IT job, which quickly evolved into state emergency field, certifying me to teach the high school intro and APC CS course in addition to my district-wide IT responsibilities. Some of the star pupils in the CS section were routinely recruited for what was basically an unpaid IT internship through a state program where they would get out of one more classes periods per day and become IT minions to build their skills, with the understanding that as their skills grew, they would lead their own team of student techs. Neat program. Anyway, in my few years at the district, we had a few kids, mainly seniors, who were clearly headed in the wrong direction. The school administration had an off-book program where they would help displaced, homeless, and obviously at-risk kids get their lives back on track and finish their education. One young woman that I remember really having issues at home made overt sexual advances in my direction and nearly ruined my life. This wasn't even for a better grade. She was already making 4.0. This was about attention and perhaps some confused feelings. I may have been 20 or so, but I was smart enough not to take the bait. Whether authentic or otherwise, this isn't to say that I didn't have trouble result from their behavior. All that I can say is thank the flying spaghetti monster that I was evaluating some IP cameras and had one run in my office. The young lady in question silently crept into my office while I had my back turned to the door as I took a telephone call from the state, closed the door, unbuttoned her already too tight blouse, and waited for me to turn around mere inches from where I sat. Not hearing her enter over the drone of equipment in the corner, I was shocked to find her waiting right behind me when the call ended. Just as I placed the handset back on the phone base and turned to move back to the workbench, she reached up, grabbed me by the head, and planted an open-mouthed kiss to my stunned lips. I absolutely did not reciprocate and pulled free as soon as I could. If anything, I thought in retrospect, that I might have hurt her as I pushed her away from me. She pointed out that her skirt was open and had popped the front clasp of her bra, burying her breast. I was horrified. She was a nice young woman, but I was a teacher and she was a student. I also did not want to go to prison or have my life ruined, so I begged her to cover up and leave immediately. She refused. I immediately called the principal, explained the situation, asked that the school resource police officer come by with a nurse without delay. When they arrived, the girl, angry that I had rebuffed her advances, proceeded to tell them that I had talked her into the office, manipulated her into removing her shirt, spinning lies that her grade would suffer if she didn't. I vigorously defended myself, but times being what they were taking her side. That was one of the toughest hours of my life. That was until I remembered that the Axis IP camera in VR that I had been testing recorded everything, with audio, in my office. They saw the video and she instantly began backpedaling. Within minutes, the truth was known and she was in tears yelling, "But I love him." At that point, my heart sank. I wasn't even mad anymore. I truly felt sorry for her. Even if she did love me, which I seriously doubted and wouldn't have mattered in any way, she was dealing with far more than 18-year-old seniors should. Her drug-addicted felon parents were almost always absent. 2 of her siblings were dead from drugs and drug violence. Her remaining sister had turned to prostitution, and she never knew if she had enough money for rent, power, or food. As the SRO had already taken her statements before she began to recant, the SRO pushed heavily that I press for false statement charges. Instead, the principal had the young woman cite an affidavit stating that the allegations were false and I was not to be held responsible. She was removed from the internship program in APCS. The thing was, however, that she was very good with computers and had planned on pursuing a CS degree at the local university. Not wanting to have her potential decent future ruined by a desperately misguided mistake, the district's superintendent allowed her to finish the CS course at another district school. She had already shown great aptitude in the internship program, so I made sure that she graduated with several letters of recommendation. Fast forward 6 years, I was about to sit down to read when the doorbell rings. I opened the door to find her standing with the binder. After determining that she wasn't there to pull something, I hadn't had any contact with her in years after all. Checking that my home IP video system was running, I invited her in. We had a really nice chat about her accountable to the local UCS department and her fast track from freshman to MS program. She opened the binders and showed me pictures of her awards. I read the abstract of her graduate thesis and asked her about postgrad plans. She had a job with bioinformatics company making twice what I make in my CTO position. I couldn't have been prouder. She asked what I'd been up to, and I told her my career moves. I stayed on a year after she graduated. I mentioned that my brother, a well-known football coach in the district, had died after being hit by a drunk driver. She cried as she told me how she was truly alone, that her entire family had died one by one from drugs or violence, all within 2 years. She calmed but started crying again. She could hardly look at me. I didn't know what to say and could only muster a kind, there, it's okay, to help. Jenny was worthless sentiment because it wasn't really okay. Her family was dead. That wasn't what she was crying over. She flipped to a tab section near the rear of the binder, thumbed through a few pages, found one, and had me read it. It was a long, beautifully penned, eloquently written, multi-page letter. It read something to the effect of, "Dear Disposable, words can never express how sorry I am for what I did to you on date of incident. My life was in shambles. I was aimless and acted purely out of desperation for attention. So few people ever paid me any mind, but you seem to genuinely care. You're always friendly and happy, a bright ray of sunshine in the dark night of my life. I loved you for that. Sure, I was a scared girl with a terrible home life and an equally terrible adult life ahead of me. I can't prove it, but I have a feeling that you were instrumental in my placement at the at-risk student assistance program. Through that, I was clothed, housed, and pushed to continue my education. Because of you, I was able to attend the local university and become a positive, productive member of society. I can't ever thank you enough." The letter went on for several pages telling how she thought of me often and always wondered why I didn't press for charges or full expulsion. The letter mentioned that she tried to visit after her freshman year, but was disappointed to find that I had gone to another job. She didn't want to seduce me or cause trouble, only thank me. The letter continued, "If you're reading this, I found you to apologize. Thank you. I hope that you are proud of the life that I have made and that my crying isn't too upsetting." I looked up from the page to find tears silently streaming down her face. The letter finished, "I didn't come here for sympathy or to brag, but mainly just to thank you and ask if we might be friends. I had a lot of growing up to do when we last spoke, and I want to make things right after I potentially ruined your life. My family is dead, and I don't have a lot of friends. I would love to have someone to share my victories and talk shop. Feel free to say no, and I might in your position, but it would mean a lot if you would have dinner with me sometime. I don't expect anything. Please excuse me if you read this far. I'm probably a crying mess right now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked up at her and smiled as she wept. After minutes of reassuring her that it was all okay, she stopped crying and gave me a big hug. She repeated that she was sorry, that I had gnawed at her for years. I repeated that it was all a big mistake and that it was just fortunate that it all worked out for both of us. We chatted for another hour or so before I became hungry and asked if she had dinner plans. We went to dinner, and that, as they say, is how it all started. We had been inseparable since. That was 5 years ago, and we have been married for 3. She turned out to be a truly fantastic person of the highest quality. Having said all that, it might have been rather odd if I'd still been working in education when she tracked me down, and things began as they did. But that's just me, I guess. Holy shit, that was long. I don't think I've ever read anything that long in one of these before. I also usually don't read the top not safe for work thread. Because that's always something sex. What's Reddit sex? Those always make it to the top. I usually purposefully ignore those ones, but I thought I'd read one of them because this one looked interesting. That was the best thing I've ever read on this subreddit. Thank you for that. That was a fantastic read. Thank you for your story. And that kid is how I met your mother. That was a pretty good story. I think I'll just read this last one and then call it quits after this. I used to teach an astronomy class which required the students to once a week, weather permitted, go outside for 2 hours to the campus observatory and point out constellations and look through the telescope. One girl in my class was pretty clever overall. She didn't like working practically hard, so she always sat with the nerdy, awkward guys who easily did all the work. She was reasonably attractive and playfully flirted with them enough to get them to basically do all her work for her. Having been in their situation in college, I quickly recognized it as an instructor. One day, she asked me if the observatory would be open, to which I responded, I don't know, because it was the middle of the day. She then sighs and says, maybe we can meet up at my place tonight, get a movie, and determine my grade some other way. Well, me being the suave physics grad student that I am, stared at her expressionless, turned and quickly walked away to the other side of the room. As I was walking away, I started hearing the guys at the table jump in on this offer and start planning to bring food and movies as they figured this was an open invitation to the table. I have no idea what happened. My favorite bumper sticker, flirt harder, I'm a physicist. Alright, I think that's enough, even though there's a lot more stories on here. That one was just really long.